All right. So on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, I have Turbo Floyd with us. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Definitely. Like I had to have you on the show once I saw you in action at the Belladonna Division show
Yes,
for British Empire Wrestling. So I just had to have you on. So thank you for actually joining us.
absolutely. I know we had a little issue there for a second, but I'm happy that we're in here and ready to go.
Right. So I'm going to start by asking you, when did you fall in love with wrestling?
uh, Probably 1994, 1995. I don't know, somewhere around there. 4 or 5 years old. Um, really getting to experience wrestling for the first time was kind of mind blowing. It was probably at that time. Um, Either early, very early Monday Night Raw or some WCW right before NWO and all that fun stuff. I don't exactly remember the first match I ever saw, um, but it Monday nights were the one night we got to stay up late because Dad wanted to watch wrestling, so we all got to watch wrestling. So that's kind of the time frame of that. And then the rest of it from there was kind of just building into where I am now. Some 25, almost 30 years later. So.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, when you mentioned 94 and 95, that's basically around the time I was like two. So I
Yeah.
started watching wrestling like when I was four. So it didn't really take that long because my dad was kind of the same way, except he would tape wrestling um because he
Oh
had
yeah.
work and stuff. So he would tape it and then we would watch it like later because he didn't want to miss anything going on at that time for the Monday Night War. So he taped WCW and WWF at the time.
Oh yeah.
So
There's
that's
plenty of
kind of
that.
how it was.
The heavy and the VHS era. So we had everything was recorded, and we've got just blank tapes everywhere back home somewhere that are just either Monday Night Raw or Nitro. So there's endless of tapes, amounts of tapes somewhere, pay-per-views, you name it. We kind of tape most of it. So I don't know that it's ever been rewatched again, but I got it somewhere.
Yeah, see, my dad had a mountain of tapes. So, but I'm pretty sure like right around the time DVDs started becoming more and more prevalent, that was when he started getting rid of a lot of those tapes. So those tapes were probably just gone, um, melted into something else that's being used as something else right now.
Right.
But
Yeah. I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if those tapes are corroded somewhere. I don't know. I couldn't even begin to tell you where they're at. Somewhere back home. That's all I know. Either my dad's attic or my mom's somewhere hiding out.
so when exactly did you decide to pursue it as a career though?
Again, probably a year or so after that, I begged and begged my parents to take me to the local wrestling club that we had. Um, so this is probably 95, 96. I started amateur wrestling. So they took me to a wrestling club that I thought was going to be punches and kicks and chair shots. Ended up being an amateur wrestling club that I kind of ended up falling in love with. I guess shortly after I discovered professional wrestling, I discovered amateur wrestling. So um, I I I wouldn't say that I pursued that with the mindset at 5 or 6 years old that this is going to make me be a better WWE or whatever AEW, I guess at this point, superstar, make me a professional wrestler. It was just something that kind of filled in the gaps until I was able to find a wrestling school and finish college and all that fun stuff before getting into professional wrestling. So from there, I just took it and did that until I all the way through college. So it was probably 22, 23 by the time I was finished up with that. And I ended up moving out from Indianapolis at that point where I went to school in Indiana. I moved out to San Diego, California, and started training with SoCal Pro under Anthony Idol before moving back closer to home to where now I'm still wrestling and more so prominent on the indie scene than I am with any particular school. But we kind of just started from ish was when I finally found a school and moved to California, essentially packed up everything I had or what I didn't have at that point. And me and a buddy just made the trip out there. And it was probably a month or two after that I started training. So and now here we are doing it full time as a full time, job and career, and making the best of it as we can.
So you mentioned how you had started like in amateur wrestling when you were really young. Like,
Yes.
I feel like you're probably one of the first people on my show to actually say that they started, doing it when they were really young. Because a lot of people do wrestling as a sport,
Yeah.
like as they're matriculating through school and stuff like that. But it depends on the school because a lot of schools may or may not have it depending on where you are.
Right.
But it's just that I think that that's really interesting that you sort of started that, learning as a sport relatively young. So could you speak to what exactly that was like in terms of starting so very young as a child and learning amateur wrestling?
So for probably the first 4 or 5 years, it was a lot of me getting beat up and crying, until I really figured it out. So I was probably, probably for the first 5 or 6 years, for me, it was just like playtime. So we had like 3 nights a week, we'd have wrestling clubs. So I think it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe, or maybe 2 times a week. I don't truly remember the full details, but I did that, the wrestling club up until middle school when we had an actual wrestling team. It was probably not until middle school that I really started to pick it up and kind of put the pieces together as far as being an amateur wrestler, and going on from there, uh, being fortunate enough to understand the sport and win many championships, I guess, along the way. But I attribute that to being getting beat up and crying for the first 5 or 6 years of trying out something that I thought was leading into professional wrestling at the time. And again, it took me till probably middle school to realize that this is the focus. This is what I want to do. I truly love this sport. So this is what I'm going to put all my focus and my energy into at that time. And I did, and I ended up having pretty good success with it. Like I said, I was able to get myself to college off a wrestling scholarship. So it all ended up paying off in the long run. But really, as far as having that background in the amateur sport, I felt that it really did help me in early successes in professional wrestling, as in terms of getting the footwork and being able to maneuver my body in ways that most people can't, because amateur wrestling is a lot of getting twisted and turning, especially starting out. When you don't know what you're doing, you go up against somebody that knows what they're doing. They're going to twist and turn and bend you ways that you didn't think you could. And you getting thrown around we practice it all the time. So like an actual German suplex on an actual wrestling mat, you learn how to land pretty quick as an amateur to prevent yourself from getting hurt. So that transition into, starting training and getting bumped, all of that kind of equates to, taking those early bumps in amateur wrestling. It's exactly the same way you protect yourself on an amateur mat is very similar, if not exactly the same as you would to protect yourself from a big fall in a professional wrestling ring. They both hurt just as much, and you learn how to lessen that pain, lessen that impact. So that's really what it was all about. And I felt that really, it gave me an advantage in that sense. And then having the mentality of the hard work and dedication to, a sport, there's no better way to find that than through wrestling, in my opinion.
So. That's amazing. Like, now, one question I do have, though, in bringing up amateur wrestling, when I think of that, I also think about people like Dolph Ziggler, who sort of wrestled when he was in high school, and Kofi Kingston, and even Kurt Angle, and even now with Gable Steveson, who just came from the Olympics. Did you ever think about going to the Olympics at all?
I think once I got finished with my high school career, I was so focused on college, and my goal was to win a Division II. I wrestled Division II college, but it was to win a national championship. So the Olympics never crossed my mind at that point. It was always on to the next championship. So my big goal was to win, a national championship, which I fell short of, which happens. But that was always the goal. So no, Olympics probably were never it never really crossed my mind. I mean, we watched it, but then you're going up against guys like, I mean, at the time, I had wrestled some big behemoth men that were probably twice my size. We're cutting down. I wrestled 197 pounds in college, and I cut down from probably 225 pounds to make that weight. But you're looking at guys that probably cut from like 260 pounds to make that weight, and they're just giant men that, especially Division One. I mean, we came across some Division One guys. Like we wrestled Purdue and Ohio State and IU. But you never really, I mean, I guess I never felt the full brunt of a guy that might be Olympic caliber wrestler, personally anyway. I mean, I've seen guys, and I grew up with guys that there's one that I can remember that was from the same area as me who went on and wrestled in the Olympics, and he's a 3-time national champion, absolute stud wrestler. But no, that was definitely, I would say it was nothing that ever was a goal of mine. I guess it was get through college, get to professional wrestling, start having some fun for me.
Now that's okay though, because I mean, the Olympics isn't everybody's goal, and that's okay, So
right, exactly.
it's like you got most of your goals, set. So I mean, there's no shame in that. It's just that there's absolutely no shame in that at all. It's like you had it set up in your mind what you were going to do, and you basically went for it, and you went to college, and you had a whole plan. So right. I definitely respect that in knowing what you want, because some people, feel pressure to do things, and then other people really do have that goal set in their mind, but you had your goal set, and that's okay. So I mean, everybody can't go to the Olympics, but that's cool too, because you can succeed in other ways.
Exactly.
So in transitioning from that amateur wrestling background into professional wrestling, what were some of the best lessons that you learned as you were training to become a professional wrestler, in a sense?
Oh boy, there's quite a bit. For me, professional wrestling, a lot of lesson learning was what not to do. So there was so many times where, and it still happens, where I do the wrong thing, or I feel myself do the wrong thing. Maybe inside the ring, kind of a on the fly thing that I may or may not do. And man, I should have done that there, or why'd I do that? That was stupid. That's embarrassing. And I'm never doing that again, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That happened a lot in training. So the way that I was taught professional wrestling and training was through Rip Rogers for the majority of my training. And his training was very strict, very on the fly kind of lessons, I guess. So we would typically do a lot of footwork and striking, drills. He would hold practice Saturday and Sunday mornings, so we would have time to get to shows or whatnot afterwards. But Saturdays were usually where we would really focus on our basics. So footwork, striking, like I said, holds, whatnot. But then he would have our Sunday practices would typically be, Randy, you get in the ring with whoever, you're going 20 minutes. I don't care what you do. And it's like, hang on, what? Because the way I first started out training was you talked over everything and you went through what you were going to do in the match. And he just throws us out there. And that's kind of like, I mean, at this point, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years when I first started there. And I had no idea what to do. So it was just going to be, well, this is going to be a mess. Let's see how quickly he can stop it and start yelling at me. So my goal was to get through maybe the 20 minutes or whatever it was. And I may have lasted, 3 or 4 before he stopped it. And he's at the time, not afraid to yell at you. So he'd let you know what you did wrong. All right, get out of the ring, next people. So that was kind of a whole lot of watch and learn and trial by error. As far as lessons learned in wrestling. So, I mean, that sort of training, I feel, has really benefited me in the long run, where now I'm super comfortable in that situation. And where I was able to build up to, Rippo, he always brags about Mike Mondo, who was a guy he trained, who has the record for most 60-minute matches called in the ring for practice with like 12 or 13. And by the end of my training with Rip, I think I was at 9 or 10. So that was how well I was able to progress. And it was all due to get in there and figure it out kind of stuff. And then, I mean, of course, he's got lessons along the way, which got easier and easier as it, came along. Because that's what it was all about, just learning. And there's, in his opinion and mine, there's no better way to learn other than just getting in there and doing it. So those were the major lesson was what not to do. You learn very quickly with Rip.
Yeah, I feel like from a lot of the things I've heard from people in training is definitely learning what to do and what not to do, because some people sort of have like come in with a set idea or basically have no idea what they're in for, and then once they learn what not to do, that's basically what wrestling is a lot of, is basically in order to keep someone safe, and in keeping someone safe is basically knowing what not to do.
Right, so, exactly.
That's a pretty important lesson to learn, and I'm glad you were able to get that. So as you've grown and evolved into a wrestler, like how would you say, since you started wrestling, on the independents and stuff, how exactly has the independent scene treated you in terms of a fan base and also just in terms of the atmosphere of what you've experienced since you've been wrestling?
It always starts off slow at a new place. So like where we met at the Belladonna division, I knew going into it, none of these people are going to know who I am. I wasn't advertised on the card because I was the last second fill-in for somebody who I think got hurt. So I knew going into it, these people are going to have no clue who I am. I know who my opponent is, and really that's about it. So the second I necessarily don't have anything set in stone on kind of what I do, but I knew the second I leave that curtain, these people need to know exactly who I am. And so for me, it's a whole lot of get through the whole, my whole silly thing, which is very silly. Be flashy, be whatever, exactly who, Turbo is, until people start understanding who it is. And it takes usually about 30, 45 very uncomfortable seconds before people are like, I either like this guy or hate this guy. So it's always different. But as we've been building steam, as I am one half of the Outrunners with Truth Magnum, we formed a tag team maybe a year and a half ago, and really just started building these characters. So we've been fortunate enough that people have really enjoyed what the character is and the camaraderie and the teamwork that, especially in the Louisville area, kind of where we're at, we travel up and down I-65 quite a bit, but people are starting to recognize who we are, and they're starting to bring us in, and the fans are starting to recognize really who we are. With the strange COVID year that we had last year, it really took a very, very long time for all that to kind of set in and people to really, truly realize who we are. So we had to take advantage of, I guess, technology and social medias to really get across the point who we were. So, I mean, for me and kind of lessons that I've learned, and Truth is the same way, that we can't always be in front of a crowd, but we have this pretty decent social media following at this point that we can really get across who we are. And then when we are advertised on a card or a billboard or whatever it is, people can look us up and and know exactly who we are before they ever see us. So that's it's really helped out. But like I said, with the Belladonna division, I'm sorry. I knew going into it, no one knows who Turbo Floyd is. But by the end of the night, they're going to know exactly who I am. And that was the goal. And I hope I achieved it. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully they have me back.
Yeah, and I really, am hoping that you do come back, because I was on commentary for it, and I remember just watching you and your partner. It was just like, like everything about your characters just remind me everything about the 80s. And It is just the coolest thing, because that's like one of my favorite decades, like in terms of music and even movies and stuff like that. And It's just like, I remember just looking at your mustache and all of that. And I was just like, this really makes me feel like I'm at home watching Top Gun right now.
Exactly.
or something like that. So it's just like, what exactly made you guys, kind of go with the sort of 80s vibe as characters?
So when Truth Magnum reached out to me, probably a couple of years ago at this point, we were both at Ohio Valley Wrestling here in Louisville, Kentucky. And we had both, he left and then to start pursuing independent stuff. And then it may have been a couple months later, I decided to leave and kind of do the same. And it didn't take long. We wrestled a few times at Ohio Valley, and we always had really good chemistry with each other as opponents. So we started going on the road. We started traveling together, and we wrestled each other every weekend, twice a week for probably about 6 months. After leaving that, we were kind of everywhere we went, we wrestled each other and really got to know each other. And he just texted me one random day, kind of out of the blue, and said, "Hey, I think we have a lot in common. We really, mesh well together. We should consider forming a tag team." And it was, okay, yes, let's do it right away. What are you wanting to do exactly? We were already kind of working on like 80s type characters, and I was going around and making my girlfriend take a bunch of pictures of me in front of silly things with like tie-dyed overalls, just trying a bunch of different stuff. I started growing my hair out. It doesn't grow very well anymore, but I was doing exactly like kind of what I felt that kind of era, like what I grew up watching was, mid 90s. And then I really started getting into mid 80s, late 80s wrestling. And all the guys kind of had the same look, like all their hair was going, but they still growed out and they kind of owned it. So I was like, well, that might be a thing I can try. Let's see how long I can last if I grow my hair out. And it grew in a whole lot better than I expected, but it's still not great. And but anyway, that's like what the majority of those guys look like. They all they looked older, they looked grizzled. I'm not old yet, but I'm getting there. But I try to make myself look a little bit older with the mustache and the hair, make myself trying to look a little bit more grizzled. And then my body type, it kind of fits in with it already. I kind of have the mid to late 80s looking body, I guess, anyway. So we went full force with all of it. I mean, he grew his hair out. He's got way better hair than me. He's got a really awesome mullet. I've got my mullet is more out of business in the front, party in the back, where his is party in the or business in the front, party in the back. But we were able to gel together, and through trying 100 different things, we've got a whole photo shoot of stuff that we ended up not even liking at all, and didn't use. We just kind of wasted my time, my girlfriend's time. She took all of our pictures, and but we had a bunch of fun. And that's another thing that we figured out what not to do or what we didn't like. It just felt like it just didn't fit us. We felt like we were wearing costumes. But the whole 80s vibe that we've got, I guess, it just feels more true to us. So like you said, your favorite music was 80s, 80s music and 80s movies. And for me, it's the same exact thing. You mentioned Prince earlier. Prince is my absolute favorite. So that's kind of, Purple Rain era. It was like the mid 80s. And we were kind of testing the waters with that kind of look, but it ended up not working like we wanted it to. But even like, I've kind of always been inspired by it. My old gears, my old character was purple with the Prince lettering of the Purple Rain lettering on it. So it's always been something that's influenced me. And then we got to thinking again, we love these 80s movies. What if we tried to look like these 80s action stars? So we started trying different looks with that, and ended up something that just didn't work for us. So we more or less accidentally fell into where we're at now. He showed up with these pink tights. I think I wore them at that show, and he's like, "Try these on. What do you think of these?" And I was like, "I think this is our look. This is kind of perfect." We did a lot of research and found like it's called vaporwave, and like vaporwave aesthetic type stuff, which is like what you saw in the 80s so like the Running Man, what they thought the future was then, that's kind of what it is now, like, or what we kind of went for. So like the neon kind of flashing lights so we're more or less going for what the future was in the 80s. We're kind of trying to fall into that, mixed with like some Miami Vice type feel. And it's been working for us. People are taking notice, and we're able to have a whole lot of fun with it, with like vignettes and our matches. It just gets easier and easier for us as we start to find ourselves falling into that groove and having a whole lot more fun with it. So I guess, yeah, just like him, all of our inspiration comes from mid to late 80s wrestling, movies, music, you name it. That's my favorite era. So we kind of just, this is what we like. This is what we're into. I think this can work. Let's give it a shot. And a year later, we're still doing it. We're still having a whole lot of fun. And it's just getting better and better. So hopefully you get to see the full effect, the Belladonna division soon, with my tag partner coming in. But it's a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it looks like it's a whole lot of fun. And I think for me, it resonates so much for me, because I think the reason why is just I hear my parents talk about, their experience with the 80s. And so it's just like them sort of exposing me to a lot of that culture, just sort of, whenever I see anything that jumps out at me that's just really 80s, it's just like I tend to just love it, or feel like for some reason there's like a connection to it, because that's really when my parents were coming into their adulthood, around that point.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I mean, it was like the 80s, and then the 90s happened and they had me. And so it's just like, there's only so much, I know, because of course, I was born in 93, and that's a whole, and the 90s is just a whole nother thing too. So it's just like hearing about and seeing things, from the 80s, and then sort of seeing it pop back up even in culture now, and sort of still have relevancy or gain even more relevancy the more people become fascinated with it.
Right.
It's just amazing. It's like it just never loses its, mojo over people. Like, it's just really cool. And I feel like that's a great way to resonate with different fans, who grew up during that era, and also fans who might not know what that era was even like.
Exactly. And I feel we've kind of met the two, like, the older fans really, really like our stuff, whether we're babyface or heel. They have fun cheering us and booing us, but then afterwards they're like, you guys remind me so much of these, mid to late 80s wrestlers, and we really love it. We want to come back and see you again. But then there's the whole new crop of fans that are younger kids that love to cheer us and love to boo us. And they're not quite sure yet, but they understand guys who are like, very early on, and that was kind of at the end of their careers for the most part, but like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage are my favorite wrestlers, and most wrestling fans can pick out who they are. I know some young wrestling fans around here that are like, yeah, I know exactly who Hulk Hogan is. You look just like him. It's like, well, that's not exactly what I'm going for, but I'll take it. So we're kind of able to cross those generations and kind of meet somewhere in the middle, to where, older fans like us as just as well as, younger fans. So that's kind of the exciting thing we've been falling into, and trying to find out how to impact, I guess, both generations of fans. But it's been working out for us. And then, it gives us a whole lot of room for growth too, because we got lucky that the 80s, I guess, became popular again around the same, like 6 months into figuring out what we wanted to do. The 80s kind of started popping around again, and you're starting to see all these trends from the 80s start coming back. So we're kind of in that spot where we got lucky, but it gives us room to grow, that we can move on to another decade if we want to. The 90s, or it could come up, and then we've got, as long as we're 20, 30, 40 years behind, those things cycle back around. So who knows? We're just here to have fun, and we're having a good time with it, and that's all that matters to us.
Yeah, and you mentioned your partner Truth Magnum and sort of the rapport that you guys have built. What would you say, because I know tag team wrestling is actually one of my definite like favorite subsets of wrestling I just love to watch. It's just the chemistry between two different people who might have different styles, but then once they combine their powers, and then they just, lay out of their competition and everything, it's like you can just pick stuff out and you just get really excited about a tag team, right? So how would you say wrestling in terms of tag team wrestling is different than singles wrestling?
Singles wrestling, for me, when I started out tag team wrestling, I thought singles wrestling was so much easier. I get to be in total control of kind of what's happening, myself, the other person in the ring, I can easily communicate with. I always just thought it was easier. But then I got into with Truth Magnum, our chemistry that we have. I feel the tag team wrestling, especially with him, has just it's so much easier in terms of, you know, the actual match, the setup, the finish, the crowd work. Because while he's in there doing whatever, or vice versa, the other person could be working the crowd, or, you know, trying to get themselves into the match, depending on where we're at as far as heel or baby face. For me, it's been a whole lot more fun being a tag team. And it just gets easier and easier with us. So I'm a huge fan, just like you. Grow up, you know, watching tag team wrestling as just as much as singles. Like, why is this just as important? I found myself being able to get into tag matches a little bit easier than singles matches. I mean, it's just so much easier for a heel to bend the rules, or a baby face to have that big fiery comeback or whatever it might be. It just makes it so much easier. And the atmosphere of it, I feel, is just, it can be way bigger than it is. And I hope that tag team wrestling continues to grow. When we first started, there was no tag teams in this area. And now, you know, I think tag team wrestling is getting bigger and bigger. We were just on an all tag team show last weekend or the weekend before that was really great. So it's coming around. I like it a whole lot better, I think, than singles. So.
Okay, and you said that there was an all tag team show, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. I've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, we went to Charleston, West Virginia. It's a company called Pro Wrestling Conquest. They did an all tag team show. I think it was last weekend that we were there. Truth and I, we were fortunate enough to get to wrestle Lenny and Lodi from WCW, the West Hollywood Blondes, at that show. So guys we grew up watching and learning tag team wrestling as kids, they came around, we got to wrestle them. So it was a really fun time. But yeah, the all tag team show, I didn't know if it would work as well as it did, and it worked out really well. So huge props to those guys at Pro Wrestling Conquest for putting that show together, and then them being nice enough to ask us to be on the show was really great. And yeah, that was West Virginia, which is a few hours away from where we're at in Charleston. So for us, it was a big opportunity to expand our growth as the Outrunners. So we were happy to be there and work for such great guys at Pro Wrestling Conquest. I hope they do it again soon.
That's so great. Like, I'm really glad that tag team wrestling is actually getting that sort of praise and that sort of shine.
Yeah.
So with everything, of course, that's been going on with the pandemic, like, how would you say that actually, you know, affected your career? Because of course it affected everybody, but how did it affect your career in particular? And how were you able to sort of push through that?
Well, luckily for me, I had a partner. So we just formed the tag team. And then I think 2 weeks later, the COVID shutdown happened here in Louisville. So it was an opportunity for us to either sink or learn how to swim as far as that goes. And being partnered up with a guy like Truth Magnum, who is an incredible hard worker. He's been in the wrestling business for 15 or 16 years at this point. So he's kind of been through it all and seen it all. But this, he said, was brand new. But we took the opportunity to, any chance we got, we were shooting videos, taking pictures, doing photo shoots, working on our character. That whole time, like, the Louisville may have been shut down, I think, for 2 months. In that 2 months, I was on my phone before I end up getting a computer, but learning how to, like, edit and do software and all that stuff was kind of, we took that time, that huge downtime of doing absolutely nothing to, we both taught ourselves how to film. We both taught ourselves how to edit. I wouldn't say we can act, but we gave it our best shot as far as videos go and all that. Just doing take after take and just meeting up with each other and watching a lot of film. It was watching a lot of guys like our old favorite tag teams like Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, guys we grew up watching, the Heart Foundation. We watch a lot of tape on those guys, and then able to piece all of that together. And we almost shot a like a full match kind of, and WWE ended up doing it like a month later with John Cena and Bray Wyatt. But we're like, we should do like a cinematic type match. I think we could get a couple guys together that would help us. And we could piece something really cool together. And we were typing out ideas and writing down like scripts and whatnot. And then I think it was WrestleMania, John Cena and Bray Wyatt did it. And we're like, okay, theirs was really good. Let's keep practicing, because I don't think we can beat that. So we put that on the back burner for now. I mean, if this stuff happens again, which I'm really hoping it doesn't, I think we might be ready to do some bigger and more exciting stuff. But for the time being, we're able to wrestle. So let's keep wrestling. I hope everybody's able to stay safe and we're able to get back into the full swing of things. Things are picking up. So I'm looking forward to the future of the Outrunners.
Yeah, and it's great that you guys were able to sort of learn how to do stuff technologically, as well as being able to just, find things to do and things to research, during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, in a sense, that's kind of what I had to do. I mean, outside of wrestling, but even though I'm just talking about it,
Yeah.
my podcast started in February, like in the early part of February, like before all of this popped off.
Yeah.
So basically I was learning how to do a whole new thing while in the midst of that, trying to figure everything else out. But I feel like the best part about that time is just learning what you can do and really learning that you really don't have any limits to what you can, absorb and learn.
Exactly.
And that's just, and that's one of the positives of this time. And I'm really glad that you and your partner were able to, take that time and learn it, and even coming up with creative ideas, even though they
Mm-hmm.
wound up being taken somehow.
Right.
It's okay though. But it's just like, you were able to do that and just let your mind just, wonder and just test the limits of where you can go. And then you learn that there really aren't any limits to where you can go.
Exactly.
So yeah, like that's great that you guys had that.
Yeah, we've
So
had so many different ideas and things that are coming up. We started our own wrestling promotion during the pandemic. We just had our first show with that last weekend, and it turned out really well. I'm really happy and really proud of what happened with all of that. And Truth Magnum really stepped up to the plate when anything that could have went wrong for the first show did. It's called Dream Pro Wrestling. And anything that could have went wrong did go wrong, and he really stepped up to the plate, and he ended up putting on the best show that we could, and it was kind of all on him at the moment. I was unable to make it. I thought I was feeling symptoms of COVID and just did not want to mess with any of that and risk anybody, so I ended up staying home. Turns out I'm fine. So I unfortunately missed out, but you can't risk something like that. But he really put the whole show on his shoulders and made it happen. And that's, like I was saying before, having a guy like him that's going to work as hard as he is, it really makes things easier for me. It makes things easier for him when I see him putting in that effort. I want to go ahead and match that effort. So we're really able to gel pretty well together in that aspect. But now we're co-owners of a wrestling promotion, so now things are getting even more hectic. So it's apparently we don't have enough to do, so we're putting as much on there as we can. Yeah, we're able to do that during the pandemic as well. It took us a year or so, but we finally got our first show done. So we're excited for the future of Dream Pro Wrestling as well.
well, congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
That's so amazing that you have your own promotion now and you have your own thing that you're building. That's
Yes.
so amazing.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, I think about that in my imagination, but then I get too overwhelmed and I have to sit down. So,
Well, yeah,
so
we made sure
yeah.
we could have everything we could lined up so that to make it easiest as we could on ourselves. So weekly meetings, making sure everything's set up, getting sponsors. paying for whatever, finding a venue. Luckily, we know a lot of people in the area, and a lot of people stepped through and helped us out as far as venues, people that were able to work for us, all that fun stuff. A lot of people stepped up to the plate, and I'm very thankful for all of them. So we couldn't have done it without all their help. I couldn't have done it without Truth. Again, we're just really excited about it, and we'll see what happens.
Great. Now, I also did see that you and Truth were featured on AEW at some point.
Yes, we were when they were in Cincinnati. We got to wrestle the returning Butcher and the Blade on AEW Dark. So we're on YouTube somewhere. I think it's just called AEW Dark. It might be Elevation is what it's called now. So yeah, we were featured on there, and that was another big opportunity that just kind of came across for us, and we were able to take advantage of it. And we were walking to the locker room, and they had the big the board there, and they were writing down the card. And as we were walking by there, they just finished writing his name, and we're writing mine. I was like, we got a match. Great. So it was a really incredible experience. AEW was so awesome. I couldn't think of a better place to work at this point. I'd never knocked WWE, but I've worked for them. I've had tryouts with them. I've had matches on Monday Night Raw with them. But AEW was such a different experience. And the biggest part and most exciting thing for us was they actually used our actual names for TV and all that. So it gave us this bigger platform for exposure and growing our brand. And now we can advertise our show, our tag team, the people on our show, and everything. That helps us build a bigger platform for everybody else that we want to bring in for, say, our shows or people that we wrestle. If we can help out in any way, we absolutely want to. So I'm very thankful for AEW and everything that they did for us, just bringing us in and trusting us with guys like the Butcher and the Blade, who took great care of us. And they got a huge response that they weren't ready for. So they were just very happy to be there. They thanked us a million times over. It was a really awesome time and a fun experience. I'm hoping they have us back soon. That's a place I would really like to be. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a huge collection of people that I'm getting to know, or people that I've talked to in the past on my show who've been on there. And I feel like a lot of them have been saying, that it was a great experience and stuff like that. And it's my favorite thing whenever I see anybody pop up on Dark or Dark Elevation like that. And I just be like, oh, I know them. And I just get really excited, whether they win or lose. I'm just like, oh my God, you're on the show.
I know.
Like it's the coolest thing ever. And then you're watching Dynamite and you see their names pop up on the bottom of the screen. I'm just like,
yeah, I know. Yeah, it's so great. And then, I mean, a lot of our friends that we've either worked with, like I used to work out with Brian Pillman, and now he's on there, and that's really cool experience. And then, and getting to catch up with him and talk with him, because it's been a couple of years since he's been with them. So you don't really see those guys once they get signed or whatever, but you can't help but feel happy for them. And then a few people I worked with at WWE and tryouts that I had are there signed now. So it was great catching up with everybody and talking with basically the roster. And everybody there was really great. They would actually come up and talk to us. I guess we were featured extras, I suppose you would call it, but it's not an experience you always get at a brand new show, where the top talent in the world will actually come up and talk to you and have a conversation and be very friendly. And it was a very warm and inviting place that, again, we're hoping gives us a call back at some point, and we get a chance to really prove ourselves. That's the goal for any wrestler, really. We just feel that the Outrunners just need a chance, and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, I feel like you would be okay too. Like I feel like AEW would be a great place, for the Outrunners to be. So basically, if given the opportunity, that would be the promotion for you or for you guys.
I think so. And we had talked about how we wanted to wrestle Butcher and the Blade, and that ended up happening, and we're real excited about it. And then one of our favorite tag teams is FTR, and we got to talk with them in the locker room, and Bryan Danielson just signed with them, so he was back there. We got to talk with him. More or less, kind of making connections with these guys, and we really feel we made an impression, or at least we hope we did. On the AEW locker room, and I hope it's a positive one. Yeah, it was just a really great experience. I had so much fun doing that. It was a great night.
So were you able to actually watch Dynamite and their Grand Slam that they had yesterday?
I haven't seen it yet, no.
Okay. Well,
but I heard it was really good. I want to see the Kenny Omega Bryan Danielson match. I heard it was really awesome. I heard the finish of it already, but I still want to watch it.
Yeah, okay. If that's the case, then I'll keep my lips zipped and I'll let you experience that on your own. But yeah,
I heard it was really good.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. And here's hoping that in the future, you and Truth will be able to participate in stuff like that more often. So
exactly.
How do you feel exactly about the state of wrestling, and what could be improved, and what great thing is actually going on, to you from your perspective?
Well, just compared to, I guess we call it pre-COVID now at this point, to where we're at now, I feel wrestling is on the upswing again. So with companies like AEW coming in and giving you almost a totally different product, so now you've got, we basically have wrestling every day of the week. It's with WWE Mondays, we've got I think Impact is Thursdays,
yeah,
AEW Wednesday, and I think Fridays now. So it's we basically have wrestling every day of the week. So anything you like more of an indie style wrestling, you can tune in on Wednesdays. You'll see what you want to on AEW. If you want some, AEW's got, I think, some really good story driven stuff as well. AEW or WWE's creative, I have always felt, has been pretty decent at developing their top talent into some good stories. So if you want to see some story development, there you are, Mondays and Fridays. I think that's when SmackDown is. Yeah. So, and then Impact has always been Impact. Impact's fun to watch just as much as everything else. So, and then there's Ring of Honor, of course. And I've got friends, a guy from my hometown is actually on the Ring of Honor roster. So there's, in my very small town, there's 2 professional wrestlers trying to make a name for themselves. So it's always exciting to watch him. I always, Eli Isom, I always watch him. He's one of my favorite wrestlers out there. So, I tune in for ROH. I watch everything on my phone at this point. So, but yeah, I think it's in a huge upswing right now. As far as what anything can improve on, I think companies are improving every week. So, even our local stuff with Ohio Valley Wrestling, they seem to be improving every week, and they've got a couple storylines that I enjoy watching as well. And I enjoy watching their characters develop. I mean, even though, we're not still there, it's still fun those are all my friends still. So all those guys, I know them on that roster, and the girls there, and they're all doing pretty good stuff as well. So locally we get that on Thursdays, so we can watch, any wrestling we want to every day of the week. So there's always something on. Pay-per-views are getting more and more exciting. The last AEW pay-per-view was incredible. WWE always pulls through on their pay-per-views as the that would just happen this summer. Slammiversary was great for Impact. So there's so much going on. There's wrestling everywhere. It kind of feels like it did when say the late 90s, when The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H were they ran the world. It was everywhere you went. There was WWF at the time. You couldn't wait to get to school on Tuesday to talk about Monday Night Raw with all your friends, and then, oh my God, this happened, that happened, whatnot. It kind of feels like that again. Like when a show happens, you kind of, for me, I just get on like Twitter or something and watch everybody else talk about it, because it's great, and the reactions it gets, and it's like every week wrestling's the number one trending thing for however long during that time frame. So again, I think we're in an upswing. I think it's very positive for everybody, especially on the independents, because I mean, AEW, they sign independent guys all the time. And so does Impact, so does Ring of Honor, Major League Wrestling does. It's just a matter of time before hopefully all of my friends and everybody that I've met along the way are able to achieve what they want to as far as wrestling goes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest things that I've learned in the past year, not even just being even being a podcast host. You were talking about all the shows, and in my head, I was just like, man, like I really do be sitting up watching a whole lot of wrestling, like
Yeah, and then you've
every
got
day,
so much to
every
talk
week.
about. So
And
your
it's
show
just,
writes itself.
yeah, and it's just so crazy when you sit there and think about how much wrestling you consume at a time. Like I remember I used to, a few years ago, me and my dad would talk about how overwhelming WrestleMania week used to be.
Yeah.
Because they would have like a different event. They would have like a takeover, one Saturday, and then they'd have the Hall of Fame, then they'd have the WrestleMania, and then they'd have the Raw afterward, the SmackDown afterward, the NXT afterward. And
Yeah.
by that point, you feel like, okay, or at least to me, I would be kind of burned out a little bit and I would just need
Yeah.
to take a break before my brain would explode. But it's like now there's so much different wrestling going on that it's just you feel like you're not watching the same things anymore, and that's a really
Exactly.
good thing with WWE and AEW and NWA, which I feel like would also be a good place for you guys too with your 80s gimmick. Like I just
Yes.
thought about NWA and I was like, and how their show is kind of like a little bit vintage, so I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my god, they'd be perfect in NWA too. But it's just
Yep.
like an Impact and everything, there's just so much going on. And as a host, from a hosting perspective, because I also do another show, Women's Wrestling Talk, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you sort of want to challenge yourself, as a fan to keep up with everything, because you don't want to just be the person that just talks about one promotion. Because when I
Right.
first started as a podcast host with my own show, I would talk about WWE primarily. And I love all wrestling, but that's what I just started off with, just to start. But
Right.
now I'm finding that that I'm beginning to branch out a whole lot more. And and I find myself getting more and more educated, on
Mm-hmm.
different types of wrestling, different, promotions and everything, and seeing what they're doing and what their missions are. And I also just love learning the fact that there are so many wrestlers who are finding success in other places that aren't as mainstream. Like that's the most inspiring part of it all. So
Right.
yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy time, but it's a fun time to be a wrestling fan, host,
Exactly.
wrestling person, like who's an athlete and all of that. Like there's just a lot going on, but it's really exciting and it's really positive. So
It really
I
is.
I
Yeah.
love it. So one question I do have for you is, who would you say are your top 5 wrestlers of all time?
Oh, of all time?
Yeah.
Um, Randy Savage. I'm a huge fan of. Basically, the reason that I started wrestling was seeing him at WCW. He was such a character. He was awesome. Everything about him as a kid, that's what you wanted to be. Same with Hulk Hogan. He was everything you wanted to be until he came over to WCW, and then he was the bad guy finally. So I hated him for the most of my childhood, but then you look back on older stuff, and Hulk Hogan was the man. Roddy Piper, I'm a huge fan of. There's so many the late '80s type guys. So Bret Hart, Roddy Piper, Savage, Hogan. One more in there. There's so many. Oh boy. Ultimate Warrior, probably. He was really exciting. Um, yeah, as a fan, going back and watching all those guys. But I was a big Goldust fan too in the mid 90s. So Goldust is a big favorite of mine. Junkyard Dog, I always like the character guys I was always really into. So I know that's 5 or 6 there. But there's so many I probably missed, but it's all a lot of late 80s, early 90s, The Rock, Stone Cold, of course, Billy Gunn, all of DX pretty much. All of NWO I got really into as I got older. So there's just so much wrestling. And as far as my favorites go, those first top 5 I gave you are my favorites.
Okay, do you have any favorite female wrestlers?
I'm a big fan of Jay Lee. Jay Lee is my favorite female wrestler.
I actually just talked to her.
I know, that's my girlfriend. She's in the other room.
Oh, snap. That's so great. I had both of you on. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, she's probably watching now. That's my favorite female wrestler.
Okay. I respect that. She's great too. I love her.
She is.
Yes.
She's hoping to be back and see you soon at the Belladonna division as well. Yeah, she said she spoke to you the other day, so I was excited to talk to you.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. So I can't wait to put both of your episodes out. Oh my gosh. Like I almost wish I knew that you guys were together so I could have had you both on at the same time and made it a couple thing. I'm a romantic. Right.
We're always willing to. We've done it before. So if you want to have us back, we'll gladly do it.
Definitely. Like that's something I was considering a couple weeks ago. But I consider a lot of things, so I need to chill out sometimes because I have like too many ideas all at one time. So what would you say the future holds for you, Turbo?
Well, right now we've touched on it. The future is kind of endless for everybody in professional wrestling, especially on the independent scene. The independents are as big as they've ever been. So as far as future goals for me, it's just get out there and do as much as I can while I can. I'm pushing 10 years of doing this, and this is the most fun I've had in my whole career. So for me, every time I'm out there, I just want to keep feeling the same feeling of this is fun. I don't want this match to ever end. And we're hoping to feel that as far as the future will take us. So the future is wide open for me. It's wide open for everybody. So we're hoping to just make the best of it as we can. And the ideal dream is to, be signed by one of these major companies, but the independents are just as big. So, and you can make quite a bit of money and make a living as we have been on the independent scene. So the future is wide open. We'll see what happens. I'm excited though.
Yes, you ought to be excited. You've got a lot of cool stuff going on. Well, Turbo, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Now, if you just take this time to tell people where they can find you on your social media channels and tell everybody what you got going on, then you have that time to do that now.
All right, great. So first and foremost, if you guys can follow Dream Pro Wrestling on Instagram and Twitter. That's my new wrestling promotion. Dream Pro Wrestling. I think it's Dream Pro Wrestling on Instagram and then Dream Pro Rest on Twitter. It wouldn't all fit on there. My Instagram and Twitter is at Turbo Floyd _. That is also my Twitch channel. You guys can watch me play some video games. You mentioned my poster and stuff and all that stuff back there. A bunch of video game stuff in here. Prolific gamer. So you can find me on at Twitch TV / Turbo Floyd. And then of course, my YouTube is Turbo Floyd. You can catch up on everything you can as far as this half of the Outrunners goes on all those social medias and all those platforms.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to see you back.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.